Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome back if you are new. My name is Hetti. I post videos every single Sunday all about health, fitness, mindfulness and travel and lifestyle. So the video that you're about to watch is going to be slightly different to my other videos. It's another interview and this time I'm talking with Jade. I'm going to leave her Instagram down below, so if you do want to check her out. We go into detail about Jade's experience with depression, how it manifested into more physical symptoms as opposed to sort of mental symptoms, and how she combated her depression and how she's completely turned it around and she's now living her truth by doing what she loves and helping other people do the same, also helping other people to achieve goals for themselves as well. So it's such a good conversation that we have. We talk so much about obviously depression, mental health, thoughts, our beliefs and our lives in general, and what creates happiness, how we can go about achieving and combating things like depression if that is something that you currently struggle with. We literally talk about so much. So even if you struggle with an eating disorder, I would definitely recommend listening to this, because eating disorders are obviously a mental health issue. It's not just a physical issue. So, and I really want to help as many people as I can, you know, not just with the eating disorder recovery, but with mental health issues as well, because I think it's something that we can all relate to. If you like this video, please don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like this, and also touching on other aspects to do with mental health and mindset and things like that. So if you do want to see more of those kind of videos, or if you want me to do any particular type of video, please let me know in the comment section and I will be sure to respond back. But without further ado guys, I'm going to show you the interview with myself and Jade. Really hope you enjoy it. So I'm sat here with, well, not physically, but I'm sat with Jade. So Jade, if you just want to introduce yourself, who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Jade and I am an NLP practitioner and an MBIT coach, and I'm currently studying counselling psychology at university, so I'm going into my second year.
Amazing.
And that's so far, that's pretty much what I've got under my belt. I've got a lot of plans, but so far, yeah, that's me.
Amazing. So for those that are watching right now, obviously my channel is all to do with like mindset and things like that. So Jade's got a really interesting perspective on this, so that's why I wanted to talk to you today about, you know, your story and where you've sort of been and how you sort of got here as well. So do you want to start with just basically sharing your story, like where did it all start for you, what happened?
That's such a good question. So I have a history of navigating depression, and I suppose from being very small, I've had I'm a big feeler. I feel a lot and I relate to people on quite a deep level. And that's something that has always been for me since being really small. So even at primary school, I'm always that kid that's come home crying about something that's gone on that had absolutely nothing to do with me whatsoever, but my two friends had fallen out and why can't everyone just get along, or this had happened and I just don't understand the friction or the tensions. And even as a small child, I'd feel these emotions and think that they were mine, but they didn't actually necessarily belong to me. And obviously as my journey's evolved and I've learned more about my personality type and empaths and what all that kind of stuff means, it's kind of unlocked. I wouldn't actually say it's unlocked the side of myself, because I've always just been that, but I think it's just given me understanding as to the things that I've experienced. So from being a big feeler, I think that's pushed, because I didn't know how to manage my emotions, because I didn't know how to manage my thought processes effectively, because I was so young. It just kind of snowballed into a load of unuseful, unhelpful ways of being that I just didn't know any better. I didn't know what to do with the massive emotions that I had. And I used to just go through periods of time of being super happy, super lively, energetic, extroverted, bit of a joker, super confident, and then periods of time where my mood would just plummet and I wouldn't want to go anywhere, and I wouldn't want to do anything, I wouldn't want to see anyone. And it was depression. I was experiencing depression, and it would last maybe a week, 2 week, 3 week, month, never really longer than a month, and I managed to pick myself back up. But then as time went on, my good days, happy days, lively Jade days kind of became less and less, and my bad days kind of got, say bad days, my down days, my depressed days, just getting longer and longer and longer. And so when I got to high school, my mental health was just, I was just suffering terribly. Didn't really want to go into school, was sobbing one minute, angry, just kind of like used to cut myself off, void of emotion. People just didn't know how to take me. They would have probably said that I come across maybe a bit hostile or a little bit intimidating, or she used to have this air around me that was like, I don't want to speak to anyone, don't want to engage with anybody. And it just worsened throughout school until I then left and started my first job, and ended up having to sign off sick because I just could not function. I just wasn't functioning. Anxiety started to creep in, my depression just plummeted massively, and then I had a solid year where things were just not very good at all. Couldn't get out of bed, grieving, that's what I would say, the word is to explain like my experiences. I was grieving something. It felt like grief, like crushing, crippling grief, and I would either experience days where I have really difficult emotions and days where I just wouldn't feel anything at all, like really, really numb. Finally got myself to the doctors. They just want to put everyone on pills, so I took them for a little while. Not the answer at all. Went through. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, I think that's good though that you've experienced that.
Yeah, definitely.
Being on, medication, because I think that is sort of the go-to for everybody, and you've got that experience as well that you can say, it doesn't work.
Yeah, because I think they just mental health. There's so many different things that everyone can relate to, but then on the same hand, it's not a one size fits all.
No.
And putting everybody who's experiencing something similar but something actually incredibly complex and different for each individual on, oh yeah, we'll put you on an antidepressant and that's going to solve everything.
Yeah,
it's just not actually the case. And I think, unfortunately for me, I mean, I speak about the NHS a lot, and I think we're incredibly fortunate to have the NHS in this country. However, when it comes to mental health, it's incredibly underfunded and it lets people down, and unfortunately that was kind of my experience of it. I had my first visit to the doctors. They kind of loosely diagnosed me with bipolar, which is an 18-year-old who's going through all this scary stuff, who has finally mustered up the courage to sit down in front of a doctor and then kind of just really loosely throw these terms around and prescribe meds and things. It's just not the way to even handle my situation. And even now, like, I'm currently trying to write a post on what language we use, because that first doctor's appointment, it kind of labelled me as depressed. I then thought this was something I was going to experience forever now, infinitely. I'm mentally unwell and mentally unsound. Because of it, I have to take medication. I might be on this medication for the rest of my life. Throwing around terms like bipolar really loosely, actually. And I thought, what does this even mean? And I had telephone assessment after telephone assessment after telephone assessment. Our unit's not quite for you, so we're going to send you somewhere else. This isn't quite for you, so we're going to send you somewhere else. I thought it was beyond hope, beyond help.
Almost giving you the illusion that you're special, like you're a special, like, oh, we've not got the right place for you, kind of thing. Makes it even worse.
Yeah, definitely. Really scary time, and I just knew nothing about this stuff either, so I was just like, wow, this is super scary. Took the medication because I didn't know any different. Didn't make me any better. Some of it made me worse. And when stuff wasn't working, I'd go back and they'd just put me on something else. So I ended up on by the end of kind of my journey with the doctors, I ended up on a really strong, like, psychotic medication, which I shouldn't have been on whatsoever. I was just somebody who's spent a number of time filtering the world, not quite as resourcefully and as effectively as what I could and should have been, and as a result I was struggling, and that was it. There was no more to it. There was no chemical imbalance, you're unwell, genetics, nothing to do with it. It was just how I was experiencing the world, and someone just needed to show me a new way of doing it. So thankfully, my mum put me into private therapy. Obviously, it's expensive and not everyone can do it, and it was expensive. But my first therapy session, I left with hope. I left thinking, wow, I'm not the only person in the world that's experiencing this, even though the doctors led me to believe that I was some kind of unsolvable case of something that I was going to have for the rest of my life. And it's from there that then everything kind of looked upwards. I remember I was having one session a week, and then I went from one session a week to one session a fortnight to one session a month. And then one day I just turned up to my session with my therapist with this notebook and a pen, and I kind of sat down in front of her and I was like, right, I want to do what you're doing, so just start from the beginning and teach me everything you know, like pen ready. She was like, it doesn't quite work that way, but I'm gonna tell you to go and do an NLP diploma. And I was like, no idea what NLP was. She didn't tell me what to expect. She just said, this is the place to start, go do this diploma and let me know how you get on. So that was kind of like my last therapy session for that time, to close that chapter. And I went off to do NLP. From the diploma I went on to do the prac, and then I went on to do MBIT, went to university, started living. Never thought it was going to happen, but yeah, just that, in a nutshell. I feel like I've probably missed out loads of stuff.
Well, we'll probably tap into those little parts that because obviously my story is quite a lot different in terms of I've never been told that I've suffered with depression, but I can probably relate to some aspects of depression, but I've never experienced that side of it. So I think that'd be interesting for even anyone watching that does struggle with depression or maybe isn't sure. Like, how would you describe how you were sort of feeling like day to day when you were sort of at your worst, and how did it affect your life? I know you sort of mentioned that.
Because it's a huge chunk that kind of briefly gone over, but like you said, I can zoom in on it. And I think
as much detail as you want.
So I've always had very physical representations of things. So everything that I kind of think and feel, now I know that they're connected, but at the time I was physically unwell. I felt physically unwell, and that was on a day-to-day basis. So I'd have like pains in my hands, pains in my arms, and pains in my chest. And when I would feel particularly low, I'd get a sensation that would build in my chest, and it started off really, really small, and I'd be aware that it was there, and it was almost like it was straight connected to my eyes and my head. So it felt like it was connected. There's a sensation here that would make me feel a little bit like I wanted to cry. When it was small, I could kind of repress the urge to cry, but it was a very heavy feeling, a very weighing feeling. So in my mind, I kind of felt as though, you hear the saying, the weight of the world's on your shoulders. There was no specific thoughts as to this is specifically causing me issues and this is why I'm feeling this way. There was no reason in my head. There's no like, this has happened and now you're feeling this. There was nothing. I couldn't pinpoint any kind of rational reasoning for feeling down, low, and having this heavy sensation to my body. And I like to think myself a smart, intelligent person, and I rationalise everything. That's my way of kind of filtering things, is how does this make sense? Make this make sense? And I couldn't do it, and I was beating myself up, and I was getting frustrated because I was physically feeling a certain way. I was emotionally drained, tired, and I just didn't have like a logical reason for it. But I'd get these sensations in my hands, sensations in my arms, and they'd start out, say on a Monday, beginning of the week, they'd start out very mild. I could feel them, like little numb, tingling sensations in my arms, just in my fingertips, and the sensation in my chest. And as the days went on, these sensations would intensify, so the feeling in my chest would grow and almost expand as though it was filling the entirety of my chest, and it would get heavier and heavier and heavier, and then this urge to cry would kind of get deeper and deeper and deeper. This grief, kind of loss, just, I don't even know if they are words to do it justice, like something's missing, like something's ripped a hole through your heart, that kind of down, just despair, just pure despair. But what makes it difficult to kind of manage is the fact that there are no conscious, I think when we have a reason for something, we can make it make sense, and we can be like, right, this is what's causing it, how are we going to tackle it? Or at least that's my mentality now. Or even people who don't want to tackle the issue, it helps to know what's causing your problems. And I genuinely didn't seem to have any reason, but it would get to a point where sensation in my chest would grow, it would get heavy, and it would physically pull me down, so I couldn't actually keep upright anymore. It'd be like carrying weights here. So I would, if I was out, I wouldn't usually be out and about, so I could kind of see when it was intensifying and getting worse. So I usually would be at home by this point. I wouldn't have been able to go to work or get out of the house because it's physically weighing on me. It would literally pull me down, just like if you had too much weight on your shoulders, you know, squatting or whatever it is, it would get that heavy that I would end up on the floor, literally fetal position, chest on the ground, and I would be struggling with the pain of it. And obviously because it's in your chest, it then feels like it was restricting my breathing. It would feel like it was spreading into my throat, into my neck, into the back of my head. It felt like this shadow, this heavy presence inside me was just expanding, and I could feel it everywhere. And I would just cry and cry and cry and cry, and often like cry out in the pain of it. And the more I would kind of sob and scream, it used to be very, very physically uncomfortable. I would sob and sob and sob and scream and scream and scream, and the pressure would kind of intensify for a while until it felt like it was expanding all over me outwardly. So it just felt like there was something inside me that was trying to get out of my body, and eventually I would either pass out, faint, fall asleep, or the more I started to cry, it kind of was slowly, it would kind of get worse and then start to release it until it would kind of all shrink back, and it'd go back to this little thing in here, and I would carry it around for a few more days and it would expand again, and then it'd release and it would expand. And that was my pattern of life. I couldn't go anywhere, I couldn't do anything, I wasn't working. Very physical symptoms, which is really hard to kind of, even now I don't feel like I'm doing it justice. But that ruled my life and it just, for everyone in my household and everything, they would just hit, you know, my mum would come running because she came screaming in pain, and it just kind of became, not in a horrible way because I always had that support, but normal. Like, they were so used to this noise, this very, you know, that it was just life. It was life for me, it was just life for everyone around me, and my mum was at a loss to know what to do. I was living with my stepdad and my sister at the time, and they just didn't know what was going on. And yeah, I think that was scary for everyone around me, because you could see me physically being pulled around by this invisible thing. And I think that's probably what maybe people don't know about depression. And I haven't got into detail with many other people who experience it, so I know for a fact that they will get physical symptoms. I don't know to the extent of those physical symptoms or what they experience in their way, but when I went to my assessments, I'd always draw this little dark circle and then draw it getting bigger and try and explain what this thing inside me was doing. And that was the pattern of my depression. It was either that physical pain or nothing, and I just had no energy or motivation or that. I was just lifeless. I just wouldn't get out of bed, wouldn't go anywhere, wouldn't change my clothes.
Just those two sort of.
Just those two. Yeah, and it was just kind of riding that out. And like I said, I started taking meds. I don't actually believe that any of them worked. I was on fluoxetine to start off with. That's an anxiety med, and then I was on citalopram, which made me vomit, so they had to take me off it, and they put me on something else. I can't even remember what they all are. And then I was on venlafaxine, and that period lasted about a year and a half. That was whilst going to the doctors. About 6 to 8 months I was experiencing that before I went to the doctors. Then the doctors weren't really helping. If anything, they made it worse, because I then had all these ideas of hopelessness and this is never going to get better, and now I'm branded as this label of being unwell and stuff like that. And then eventually, like I said, I ended up going and seeing a different therapist, which worked massively.
Yeah, and just a new perspective on it as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's crazy, like what I was saying, like depression has never been a big thing that I've experienced as much, but coming from that, like from a perspective of, I always assumed that it was like having dark thoughts or just within our mind, and like you said, like it's completely, everybody's case is totally different. And I think, you know, not having, like you say, like a physical thing, like, oh well, it's because I've been bullied, or it's that makes it much harder. Yeah,
and I think, like, obviously dark thoughts, difficult mindset played a massive role of it. And for me, it was always a case of, it was either when I'm in excruciating amounts of pain, because it was physically extremely painful, these dark thoughts were escape thoughts. Like, I don't know how else to make this stop. And there's always a part of my mind that was like, you're still here, like, and it's not even that you're gonna be okay, but kind of like, what, this bit of my mind that would be like, what is going on? There has to be an explanation for this. Like, even in the midst of being on the floor, being in pain, there's a bit of my mind that's saying, fight it, because fight whatever this thing is, and don't let it get the better of you. And you know, there's got to be an explanation for it, and there's got to be and there's been another part that's literally just warring against each other, like, you can't endure this much longer, like, it feels physically like it's going to kill you from the inside out. How can you end it? How can you end it? How can you end it? And I've always been able to rationalize, and it almost feels like you're telling yourself that there is no other way out of your pain other than to do whatever. Never been someone who's experienced self-harm or done anything like that, or ever had the desire or the urge to do that. And whenever my thoughts, like you said, have become dark, or you think that that's a part of it, which it is, it's more just like hopelessness. Like, there's nothing. What else? Give me another logical way out or explanation or way of coping, and I will take it. But when your mum's sat next to you and you're screaming at her to help you, like, get this out of me, what's going on, and she's like, you know, you Google stuff, and Google's like, your doctors have wanted to just pump you with meds and it's not working, your mind turns dark. Is it dark, or is it that rationally as humans, what other option do we feel is available to us at that time? So I think I can relate to that, to those side of things. You know, there's a lot of stigma around depression, mental illness, suicide, and I don't think that stigma should be there whatsoever, like, because everyone's instances are completely different. I hate they're doing it for attention, or I hate all those things, because even if they are doing it for attention, something's seriously not all right. Why do they want attention? What is it that they're wanting to get from you? Because they're going to some extremes and they need you to listen. Do you know what I mean? Like,
and
so I think
it's not human to go to those extremes. Like, that's not, we're not drawn to, you know, harming ourselves and things. So if there's a reason, it's a huge.
It goes against, like, everything. Like, you put yourself in the situation. Anyone puts yourself in a situation of immediate physical danger, and your body responds a certain way. Like, we do recoil from it. No one invitingly welcomes this stuff. So it makes you wonder, like, especially with mental health, there seems to be like an outweigh of things. Like, people say that you begin to change, like, when, I can't think of the quote now, but like, when something becomes too difficult to stay here, we do this. When this becomes too much, we do that. And it always feels like it's a case of weighing up the situation, or weighing up the odds. And when someone's life has become so difficult that then they're resorting to something else, it's like something is outgrowing something else. And that is what it's about. It's a weird way of survival, like protecting yourself, in the case of like protecting your body from this harm, protecting your mind from enduring this any longer. So even if it's like an outing, the same hand, it's still this self-preservation instinct, if that makes sense. But
and it's like, you know, we're trying to escape that harm or pain, you know, we're trying to escape that, and you know, hopefully, like, we can escape it before it gets too far. But no, that's super, like, interesting to hear it from a completely different point of view. And I think, like, definitely I'm a big believer that, you know, even if you just start within your mind in terms of like thoughts, depression and like anxiety manifests into something physical, which
of course it does.
You're, like, you know, you can't, well, I guess, like, did you sort of ever come up with like where it all started in terms of how it started, or was it just, you know, was there any event that happened or anything?
I'm not. I mean, I always say people who know me well will probably say that I'm a sensitive person. I would say that I am highly susceptible to feeling all the time. So my spectrum and my scope for feeling emotion is very vast and very broad, and my my ability to kind of filter things in terms of thought processes can go very deep. I'm extremely analytical. I'm extremely spiritual. I'm a big feeler. And I think that's part of my personality, and it's part of who I am. And I know that we spoke before about saying, you know, this is who I am, so these things are always going to happen to me. That is something that I've had to spend a lot of time rewriting, because really it's a lot of things that I've experienced are what I'm doing with who I am and how I'm responding to the feelings that I'm getting, and I've learned to rewrite that. But fundamentally at the core, I'm a big feeler, and the things that happen in life impacts me on a very great, deep personal level. I always look for how this I will carry this with me moving forward, how this is making me feel on the inside. I wouldn't say that I've experienced any massive trauma, but I would say that the things that I have experienced, I've felt them deeply, and then there's been a number of those things throughout my life that have happened, that have all contributed to then the state that I found myself in for that time. So just, you know, I live with my mum, didn't have much to do with my dad until way later on, and it was my grandma that kind of provided his role, so financially, babysitting, finances, just another person besides my mum in this kind of family trio. And when I got to year 8 at school, my grandma passed away. Normal things that you know, a lot of people experience. I do think that throughout life, though, I've felt things on a very great level. I've not been very good at reframing things or putting things in their place or putting things into perspective or having the best mindset or the most resourceful mindset. So I've just let things affect me in ways that maybe they didn't need to, looking back, but they did in really real ways. And like I said, I think that's just built up over time. That, and I can't underestimate walking into a room, walking into every classroom, every playground, every environment on the street, every single situation at home, and be absorbing people's emotions that aren't yours. That's a real thing for me, and I don't know if it's something that everyone believes.
I am big too. Yeah, it's something that it's something that I've realised more recently. I absorb people's energy.
Yeah.
Both good and bad. Like sometimes it works. I was around like a few drunk people once, and they were just really hyped up and everything like that, and I was completely sober, and I came back buzzing. Like I was like, I feel like I've drank alcohol. I'm feeling so but yeah, and obviously it works the opposite as well, like when you're absorbing negative.
Yeah, and that's had a massive impact on my own mood for such a long time, especially if, and like again, I don't know how much people are going to relate to this or believe it, maybe they will, or it's not something they can comprehend, but if you're absorbing energies every minute of your day that you're around another person, whether that be sat next to someone on the bus on my way to work, to then the countless customers that I would meet, to everyone that I would kind of come into contact with, and then there's my own family and their difficulties. I can sometimes be feeling something that I'm picking up from somewhere else and not even think that I'm picking it up from somewhere else, so I believe that it's mine. And if you're carrying someone else's despair or someone else's difficult emotions and harbouring them as your own, and it just that kind of transference that happens, that is scientific, that you can look into, that therapists need to be aware of, because they can transfer their stuff and their clients can transfer to them. It's a real thing. It's a really palpable thing. Even for people who aren't empaths, you know, therapists have to be aware of transfer, and that's when you're around someone else's stuff, you need to make sure that you're not taking on that stuff as your own. And naturally, I've done that from being tiny, and I think it's all contributed to then getting to a point where I wasn't coping with stuff that I was maybe holding on to from 10 years ago that never belonged to me, to stuff that was mine from 10 years ago that I haven't filtered through, I've not registered properly, I didn't let go of in the way that it should have been let go of, not processed it through my mind, it's still sat in my subconscious. Loads of stuff, and it's stuff that maybe I'm not aware of, like maybe I even consciously, you know, I don't hold any ill thoughts around my relationship with my dad or my upbringing or my grandma's passing. I don't consciously sit here and hold any of these things, and I didn't think that I did throughout that year of navigating depression. But I must have done, or there must be something. So kind of the long-winded answer that I don't to this day know what caused that period of my life, but I can take a guess. I can hazard an educated guess.
I love that though, because I think there's going to be so many people, like even now, like I'm relating to that as well. Like I experience sometimes if I take a nap or if I wake up like in the transition phase and up and still asleep, I have this experience of like having not a panic attack, but like my heart racing. And what you said there is absorbing people's energy. I totally relate to that. Like the light bulb,
you just don't. You don't know how long, like that's kind of stuff stays with you, especially if it's a big emotions. Like how many times have we been around people where the energy's been aced, we're having laughs and joke, and we then have a great week that stays with us the whole week. Why would it be so difficult?
You can't
the opposite. Yeah, you can't always explain it. It just, you might even bump into someone, have a brief chat with them. That's it. That's your mood set for the day, and that was just a transference of emotions between one person, and they put you in a good mood for the rest of the day. Likewise, I'm sure we've all had conversations with people that hasn't gone the way that we want it to be, or maybe they were particularly negative, and it's put a dampener on our whole day. And when you're doing that with several people every single day over a large period of time, all this emotion coming in and out and all over and everywhere with no conscious thoughts and some conscious thoughts, and it's going to tip you until you learn to really manage that, understand it, recognize it, filter it correctly, work with it correctly, which has taken me 4 years now to do, and I'm in a much better place for it. I can understand why up until this more recent period I've struggled with my moods the way that I have. Like I remember my mum saying, do you think maybe you have bipolar, you're experiencing bipolar? And I can remember my doctor saying it, and the reason for it was because this spectrum of emotion that I had before my depression kind of fully took over, I could be ridiculously low, rock bottom, just not nice, and then within literally the flick of a switch, I could come into contact with somebody or see something and my mood might shoot up, and I would be laughing, joking, life and soul, energy and vibe, and then again, flick of a switch, I was flitting to a different emotion, and it was just what I was engaging with in my environment that would just flip me one way or the next. Before eventually it flipped me one way and I kind of stayed down for a period of time. But I do just think I vibe and take stuff in everywhere.
I think even like most people will, to an extent, like you say, but like to people like you and me, like we absorb it a hell of a lot more. This is the thing, and this is why I love that you're talking about this, because it explains so much. And for people that are experiencing like physical pain and there's no reason for it and they can't pinpoint, like everything that you were saying about, not necessarily you've been through the typical description of trauma. I think some of those, even trauma doesn't have to be being abused as a kid or anything like that. It can be an event that can happen. But the thing is, like what you were saying, we, as kids, have not been told or taught how to deal with that. We subconsciously soak all this in, and then it's locked within our body, like we're taking around this shit that isn't ours, and there's no reason for it, and then we're internalizing it and blaming ourselves for it. And I think like that's super powerful that you
100%. And even this is where obviously to an extent, and with NLP and with the things that even I'm on with learning to shape my therapeutic practice in the future, your past plays an important role on your life and on your current situations. That's fact. And I think it's important to recognise the role that your past plays and how incredibly powerful it is on your current state and how you are moving forward. Your past can hinder your progression if you live there, focus too much there, or if you're working on it in therapy with somebody who's not doing it right or doesn't understand the power of it. We don't always need to understand, and this is something that I'm massive on and a living testimony of. I am now 24 years old. I've dedicated the past 4 years to learning about mindset, managing our emotions, managing beliefs, living authentically, all these things that I preach and talk about on my Instagram and everything that I'm kind of on with. In order for me to have gotten here, you know, I'm chatting with you about my depression, and I'm saying to you that I don't know specifically. I can hazard a guess, I can make educated guesses and discuss it like we have done, is to, you know, now I understand myself better and empaths better. I can understand trauma and how I experienced it. Still don't know the ins and outs. I've still not explored it in therapy, and yet I have still made changes and I have still progressed. Was it necessary for me to understand where I've been in order to get me from where I was at the age of 18 and 20 to where I am now? No, I've not once addressed it. I've just taken my current state, my current emotions, my present state at that time, and worked with what is needed to get me from there to where I want and need to be. And now here I am. And from a healthier position, I can look back on that time. Do I think that it would be helpful? Would it have been helpful, and was it helpful? Is when I was in the middle of that, when I was having therapists try and unpick my past or ask me what went on when I was 10, 11, I was leaving even more distressed, even more uncomfortable. I would be crying. Nothing felt like moving forward because they weren't moving me forward. They were focusing on all the pain of my present and then trying to uncover bits of my past. I think for me, I always want to stress how much there's a time and place to work with our pasts, and it shouldn't be the first point of call for a therapy session necessarily. It might be, everyone's different, but definitely in my own beliefs, I want to move everyone forward into a safe, comfortable, healthy, resourceful, effective, ecological position. Then if curiosity calls and they want to understand where they've been, then it can be worked with in healthy ways and in safe ways. I don't always think it's necessary to know. Like that, I still don't know, and yet I'm functioning better and I'm functioning well. That's one thing that I would say. And everyone's beliefs are different, and everyone thinks differently about therapy and how it should run. But I would definitely say that for me, solution focused, looking at where you are and where you want to be rather than where you've been. That makes sense.
No, I like that. I like that a lot, because there's a lot of like typical therapy which they tend to just, and especially with like my struggle as well, I was getting so overwhelmed with looking at, well, what caused this, what happened when I was 5 years old, and where it, like, I guess I'm similar to you in terms of like I like to rationalize and understand things. I guess from a curiosity perspective, it's good to sort of think, oh yeah, that makes sense. But I totally agree and love that you kind of like say we don't always need to look in our past and look at that and address that, because we're not there now. Like, yes, it might be relative, but we're now. What can we do moving forward?
100%.
And I think that's why people a lot of the time don't have a good perspective on therapy as well, because they think, oh, I don't think about when I was 5 years old, and that like our past shapes us, yes, but we are always evolving. Like, just, you know, understanding who you are at your core.
100%. I think the general consensus for me as well, you know, I've experienced people who are reluctant to have coaching, reluctant to have therapy because their experience of therapy hasn't been a good one. More often than not, when someone's experience of therapy hasn't been a good one, it's because they've left feeling 10,000 times worse than what it was when they went in, or they've left feeling like nothing's actually been achieved. And when that's the case, more often than not, it's because they've spent too much time exploring an uncomfortable present or an uncomfortable past without moving them out of both those places and into somewhere more comfortable. And it's a really clear distinction. It's something that not just what I believe in and I've experienced. You know, I've gone in and spent an hour talking about how uncomfortable I am, how much pain I'm in, the experience of my day-to-day life with depression, the ins and outs of what that's like and how that feels. And you leave, you've just spoken about all those things for an hour, and you leave carrying all those things. They're now at the forefront of the mind. The pain that you've discussing is right at the front of your mind. You've just been talking about it, and your depression's at the forefront of your mind. You've just been discussing it. and your past and that shit situation that happened in your fives at the front of your mind, you've just been talking about it. Nothing's been done to move you out of that, to give you any kind of hope. Moving forward, we're going to put in place this. You know, these are the changes you need to make to feel better about your current. When that doesn't happen, when there's no solution to the therapy other than just exploring things that are already kind of known, usually that's when people say it didn't work, it wasn't helpful, it upset me, it was uncomfortable, I left feeling worse. Whereas when you go in, speak about something, it's relevant, it's necessary to say what you're experiencing, but then focusing on how we're going to change that and what we're going to do moving forward is going to put you in a better space of mind, a better mind frame, better mental and physiological state than, like I said, than what dwelling on the past is going to do.
And I think as well, like, only, you know, certain types of therapy, but typical therapy, like I say, it kind of only focuses on what is wrong with you, and you're left feeling, or you, I mean, I've not had many typical therapy sessions, I'm just going from what people have said, but you kind of just focuses on what's wrong with you, like as if there is something wrong with you. And I think, again, that's why people have a negative relationship with therapy, and like, oh, well, why would I go to therapy because nothing's wrong with me? Like, it's you.
This is where all the stigma comes from, and where all the,
because we're focusing on every little part that isn't working right, and you then create a story about yourself that you are broken, or you're not normal.
Wrong with me. And that is really difficult. I remember even the first thing that my therapist did was go through the Myers-Briggs type indicator, and I'm INFJ, that's 1% of the population, and one of the most conflicted personality types that there is on the scale. And
that's mine.
I literally was, I cried when I heard it, because they got this book, the app that did the testing, and this book that she read on my personality type, and then obviously I went away and read even further. She was reading me back, and I was like, the doctors have had me believe that, you know, there's something wrong with my brain. I've led myself to believe that there's something not right with me. I'm not okay. I'm not functioning as a human should. You know, there's something wrong with me. And then to have someone read out who you are, who doesn't know you, in this book that then several other people must have read and also identified with, I just broke down in tears, just absolutely sobbing, because I thought, oh my goodness, like, I'm not alone. It's not just me. So there's other people out there. I am a rare personality type, so maybe that's why I haven't been able to meet others who I can engage with so far in life and connect with on a deep level. Just answered so much, and it's changed my whole outlook and perspective.
I think as well, like, it always comes back to the main sort of point that we're all normal, we're all functioning beings. You know, we just experience like hard times sometimes, different struggles, but at our core there is nothing inherently wrong with us. We're not a broken, you know, human being. We are the exact same, experience different things. And like what you were saying, like, you know, there are other people like you, and
always someone that's going to be able to relate to what you've experienced. And 100%. And it's a nice feeling, because we can shrink our world right down to us and our problem, and we genuinely either forget that there's people outside of that, there's a life outside of that, there's a world outside of that. It's really, really easy to do, like, bring that everything right in and look at it through the tiniest scope, and tell ourselves that we're the only ones dealing with it, the only ones experiencing it. And it's kind of like there's a world outside of this moment that you're living in, should you choose to recognise it and see it. And it can actually bring us comfort when we acknowledge that that's the case.
Yeah, I love that. So obviously you mentioned like a bit of NLP and techniques that you can use, but I guess, like, so as you said before, you now have learned how to sort of manage yourself more in your emotions and thoughts and beliefs. How do you sort of go about, like, terms of, you know, day-to-day life, like how do you go about navigating those things differently to how you used to with the knowledge that you've got now?
Yeah, I'd say there's so many different things, and it's so intricate, and each situation maybe would call for me to deal with it in a different way. The one thing that I would say is powerful, and what I discovered in my first day of therapy and the first day of NLP and continuously throughout everything, is outcomes. And then under outcomes comes everything that else there is in NLP. But I suppose even on the waking up in the morning and asking myself what my outcome for that day is, not what am I going to do with that day, what is my ideas for the day, what is it that I want to achieve, how is it I want to be, what is it that I want to have, what is it that I want to do, and how is it that I want to feel. So do, be, have and feel is something that I carry with me all the time. The first thing that I would do with any client as well: what do you want to do, what do you want to have, how do you want to feel, who and what do you want to be, and taking that with me everywhere. So what is the outcome for every situation that I come across? You know, if I'm feeling a certain thing, how is it I want to feel? If I'm going into a discussion or a conflict or a conversation with someone, nothing is ever meaningless. Everything always has meaning. I always have an outcome for things. So if I'm going to take something up with an individual, this isn't just I just want to tell you how I'm feeling, to offload all this stuff onto you, which happens so all the time. But what is my outcome for doing that? And if I don't have an outcome for it, if I can't see an outcome for it, if there is no specific outcome for it, then I do not do it. Or if I'm trapped in something, feeling something that's unresourceful, what is my outcome for either the change that's needed, or what is my outcome for not changing anything? Why is it that I'm choosing to stay this way? Like, what is it that I'm hoping to achieve? And I think it's just, and then authenticity comes into that, and then why for me is that this important? I think whether the big things, little things, like I said, your day, or whether the big things that need to change in your life, your career, something in your relationship, always asking myself, what is it specifically that I want out of this? And then into that would come why it's wanted, and what life would look like, or what that day will look like, or what that moment will look like, or what that relationship will look like once it's achieved, to determine whether it is healthy, resourceful, ecological, effective. I think there's so many things, like NLP, there's such a broad scope, which is amazing, because it just means that there's so many tools for helping people facilitate change. But I think recognising that there is always choice for me. I always get to choose how I want to be, feel, do, have. Always choice. I'm choosing. No one else is in control. Responsibility. With that, recognising that choice comes responsibility, knowing that I am responsible for myself. What happens to me and what happens in my life gives me so much control, because I am always not just choosing but responsible for what happens to me. When you're not putting that elsewhere and you're carrying that on yourself, and you get to control the possibilities and what you're experiencing. I think it's freeing. People might think it's burdening or it's difficult when you start to take responsibility, but actually I think it frees you from other people controlling, determining how you are and how you function in the world. So to outcomes, choice, control, responsibility, and change something. If what you're doing isn't working, do something else. Even if you don't know what else to do, doing anything else will increase your chances of success.
I have heard as well that as soon as you ask yourself a question, either your conscious mind or your subconscious mind will automatically give you an answer. Like, even if you ask, why is the sky green? That doesn't make sense in itself, but your mind will automatically come with an answer. So I think, like what you said, like, change something, this isn't working, so asking yourself, what can I do instead? You will automatically come up with something else. I love, like, what you said there. Like, I'm going to take that with me. I think, you know, waking up and giving yourself that choice, because I think that's a big thing that people don't realise, and, like, even, you know, forget that you always have a choice. And, you know, what you said about outcomes, you know, waking up and say, you know, I'm going to work today, or I'm going to see my friend today. What is the outcome that I want? How do I want to feel? Because a lot of the time we just sort of go through life and I think this is the big thing where a lot of people tend to believe, like, life is happening at us, or to us rather than life is happening for us. We have that choice. And I love that. Like, you know, how
it's such a massive thing. I literally was just thinking then, like, you know, if someone says, oh, I had such a shit day today, and I'm like, oh really? Well, what was the outcome for the day? Well, not to have a shit day. It's not really specific.
Yeah.
You've saying that you've had a shit day, you're saying that things have happened that you didn't want to happen, but when at any point did you establish what you did want for the day? When did you ever establish what you do want? And because if you had done that, would you still have the shit day? Because if you had a clear idea for it, you could have been working in line with that idea, with that outcome, with that purpose, with that thing that you wanted to achieve. You could have done that all day. You could have physically made steps to do that, and then would you still have the shit day? But you've gone into your day, and you know, there might be this bit, well, spontaneity, like I just want to wake up and I just want to, and that's fine, and we can do that once we have a clear view of what our values are, and making sure the things that we engage with align with those values. When we know that we solidly have solid ecological beliefs about ourselves and the world, then maybe we can jump out of bed and just have a day, because our actions will subconsciously align with those healthy beliefs. The reality is, though, that we are never perfect, and there are always beliefs that need rewriting to become even more effective. That's not saying that they're bad. There are always things that make us even more resourceful, even more resilient, and so I think that we always need to have an outcome. You know, I had this conversation with someone that just went so bad, we fell out. Well, what was the outcome for the discussion? What was it that you were trying to get? Oh, well, I don't know, I just had a chat with them. Or, well, I was feeling mad, so I just told them how I felt. Right, and why was that? Like, what were you trying to achieve in telling them that they made you mad? Oh, well, I don't know. In so many situations in life, we can set an outcome and then work in line with it. In the smallest things to the biggest of things. When we don't do it, then we have no one else to blame or to hold responsible. Don't go our way.
Yeah, it's so powerful. Like, just think about it. Like, when you, I think this is probably a good example as well. Like, when you go to the shops, you always have an intention of going, unless you are wanting to browse, but you never really go to Tesco to browse. Like, you will always have in mind, like, oh, I need to get butter. And you might go to Tesco and get butter, but you might also come out with a few other things that have, you know, that you saw along the way. But like, I think it's the same for life. Like, in general, whatever exercise you do, or, you know, whatever you do day to day, like having some kind of intention for the day.
Yeah,
like going to an interview, you know, maybe your intention is to get the job, but what other outcomes you choose?
Yeah, 100%.
Experience for and things like that. I think that's so powerful. I'm definitely going
to being self-aware. There's another thing. People go through lives being unaware of what it is that they're actually doing, and I don't mean what they're doing is in the actions that they're doing, but what feedback they're continuously getting back from the environment. Just using your senses, like checking in with your own body, but also just being aware of what is going on around you. Because if a time does come to kind of look back on an experience, or to rebuild something, or understand specifically where something has gone wrong in order to change it, if our senses aren't switched on to that environment, we're doing ourselves a disservice when it comes to trying to then facilitate change, because there's so many blanks missing. Like, if a sound has had an impact on something, if it's triggered something, or the tonality of someone's voice has, whatever it is, our senses play a massive part of engaging with our environment. And when it comes to then visualizing things that we need, if we're going to be attuned to those senses and use them, I think it's just it's a huge part of NLP, but it's just a huge part of life, that people who are aware, more sensory aware of themselves and their environment, will function better than someone who's switched off to what's happening around them. Sometimes just the most basic things will be giving us feedback from what we're doing, but if we're not aware of or listening or noticing that feedback that we're getting, we don't always even recognise when change is needed or when it's time to do something new, because we're not paying attention to the impact that, or what our environment is telling us from what we're putting out, or what we're doing, or a situation we find ourselves in. Being aware of what is going on is really, really, really important, I think.
So true. And I think it just gives you back that power. Like, there's so many people, like what we said, going through life and allowing life to happen to them, when in reality you all have a choice. You have a choice to, you know, life is happening for us for a reason, and if it's giving us those same signs that it's always giving us, and we're just choosing to ignore it, doing it for a reason, and like it just gives us that power back, and like you say, just being conscious of it and asking yourself, you know, how is this making me feel? How's this person that I'm hanging out with making me feel? Or am I even enjoying the course that I'm studying, whatever? And like what you said before, like the intention behind it, what's the intention that we're doing it for? You know?
Yeah, I think the things for me and you, I think we're naturally those people that will think into these kinds of things. And there's been so many things, especially recently, even over this past couple of years, where people have outright asked me questions about myself, things that I should know because it's me. Not long ago, someone asked me who I am. Who are you? And I was like,
Such a deep question.
Or we think it's a deep question, but then when it actually comes to it, because he filtered out everything that he wasn't asking me, like, I'm not asking you what your name is, because automatically when someone says, who are you, I want to say Jade.
Yeah.
But didn't ask for your name. I'm asking you who you are, not what you've done, not where you've been, not what you have, not car you drive, not where you live, not what your job is, just who are you in here. And someone else asked me something, what are your values? And these questions are what makes us up. And I don't know whether it's an upsetting thing that we're unable to answer them straight away, or we answer them in a way of how we are, who we are in terms of our environment and or our community or our social status, or the beliefs that other people have of us, or what people expect of us, so what they expect us to be in terms of our answers and stuff like that. And there's so many things that since doing NLP and since interacting with other coaches is exercises to challenge myself, to challenge my beliefs and challenge what I take as gospel, or challenge the subconscious things that control my life. I don't actually know where they came from. You know, it's nice to write a list, you know, I write lists of my values, what they are. There's loads of them that I wouldn't even think were values, and then challenging it. So, you know, everything that you're doing in life, does your workplace echo and mirror these values that you've written down on this piece of paper? Challenge your experience of life and in life. You know, you have all these values. How much of what you're doing actually aligns with these values? How much of what you're doing actually aligns with who you are? Challenging, is that you? Where have you got that from? I think NLP, once you get to a point in life where you feel that you are doing good and functioning well, it opens up this space of experiencing something that you would never before have even acknowledged. Like, there was never space before to ponder what my values were or consider who I am. And that might sound like a really silly thing, but I was all consumed in navigating this stuff, which we all navigate, whatever it is that consumes our life and sweeps us up and hustles us along in this routine. I think creating space and time to challenge things and think about things and ourselves and become consciously aware of our experiences in life, it's a really, really profound thing that I don't think I'd have learned if I hadn't gone on this journey. I probably would have just been this robot. We just kind of go through life and don't take note of what's going on.
Question anything. And this is what, like, I love learning about this stuff, but it's not something that we are taught in school. It's something
it should be.
And is considered, you know, not the norm. And yet this really is what everybody should be. We should all be doing it. But like the first thing when somebody says, you know, tell us about yourself, you know, the first sort of thing is what you do as a job. You know, you might tell them like what you're interested in, or what gym you go to, what car you drive. Yet all of those things are actually not us. They just
just what make up our lives, or we distract ourselves.
But yet, values and your core values, I think is a powerful question, and like something that you don't think of. And something that I'm trying to do more often now is I was somebody that always hid my emotions quite a lot. I didn't express my emotions. I would never cry in front of anybody. I was one of those kinds of people. And recently, over the past couple of years, I'm crying at everything. Like anything will make
the floodgate is just open.
Yeah, like Lloyd's TSB advert will make me cry. No joke. But I think now, like, questioning that, like, what is it about that is making me cry? And it really uncovers like stuff that you would never even think about, that, you know, it sort of uncovers like what your core values are and what makes you, you know.
Yeah. And there's always space to improve ourselves and better ourselves, or become even more effective at what it is that we're doing. I remember I had a conversation with someone only yesterday. I manage my emotions more effectively now. However, I was kind of the opposite to you. So I was very freely expressive. All the time I would express how I was feeling, whether that be as a child and it be aggression or anger, whether it was sobbing or crying. I wore my heart on my sleeve, and anything that I was feeling in that moment would be expressed. And after navigating that period of time with depression, all my emotions that I would express seemed to be physically uncomfortable. It wasn't a pleasant experience to be expressive, and a lot of the time my emotions would take over me. So it wasn't that, it was kind of like I didn't get say, they were just there, and they were very uncomfortable and very prominent. And I did all this work, and it's interesting, like even with learning NLP and things like that, you can almost take things to too much of an extreme. So I would just analyze everything that everyone was saying constantly, because I had this new ability to do so, pick apart people's language structures. I would not show emotion because emotion was uncomfortable, and I now had an ability to control it to such an extent where I could sit there when maybe actually emotion was necessary, and to be expressive was necessary, and to come across as human. But because I'd found this way to really control it, I would just come across no rapport. So if I was having a discussion in one of my relationships, and I would be upset on the inside, and I'd be understanding why this is important and why this needs discussing and why this is kind of hurtful and why the other person would be expressing this emotion. But because I was like, oh, I'm good at controlling this now, and I have this where actually expressing emotion is uncomfortable, so I don't particularly enjoy doing it, and I don't want to do it, but yet I'm sat with someone who's being expressive and I'm not, break down in rapport straight away. So my NLP actually wasn't working because we're not on the same page. It's just interesting how you then learn this stuff, but then there's a time and place for it. There's ways and situations where it's more effective than others. Sometimes flexibility is another thing, another section of NLP. You need to be flexible. It's all right having all this knowledge, but then it's making it fit with life. And I think I've gone from one extreme to the other, and now I'm balancing back out somewhere in the middle. And I told myself that I'd rather be at that extreme than that extreme, even though that one wasn't particularly healthy. The first year after learning the NLP prac, I was doing everyone's head in. Like, is that what you mean? Is it just coach constant, like just not turning it off? And everyone was just like, can we just have Jade back and not this coach that now analyses every situation? And I think now I'm kind of like bringing things back into balance, but there's always stuff to be worked on, and that's what I'm working on now, is to kind of be, I'm going to be more human in certain situations, and when's best to use it and when's not, and stuff like that. Always a journey, life's a journey, it doesn't end.
No, I love that. You do, like, with what you learn, you tend to, the pendulum tends to swing a little bit, like you tried that, and that, you know, maybe didn't work, so now you can sort of come back in this like grey area, which I think is really cool. I like that. So I've written down, I mean, we've pretty much covered a lot, but the last few questions I was going to ask is, what advice have you got for anybody at the moment who maybe is struggling with depression at the moment, and maybe they would, you know, they have goals for themselves in the future, but right now they just don't seem even relevant right now for their life because they feel so trenched in like their current circumstance?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I think we can let ourselves believe, like we've already spoken about, is that we allow depression to be who we are rather than an experience that we are currently navigating. And it's always really frustrating when you hear people say, you know, it can be really frustrating sometimes when, I know my mum used to say things like, you're going to be okay, and even other people's definitions of what depression is, you know, it's take this tablets, you're going to be all right, whatever it is that you're being told. I just think, remember that currently we're talking about, it's easier to kind of bring our mind around the idea that this isn't something that you have always experienced. This isn't something that you are always going to experience. Right now, in this moment, you are currently experiencing X, Y, and Z, currently experiencing depression, currently navigating the experience of depression. Right now, let's not think about the fact that you might have been experiencing it for this amount of time, or that this, just here, take this day, you know, it's an experience that you are navigating. It doesn't define who you are. It isn't who you are. And I know I'm trying, what's frustrating is I'm trying to think of the things that I didn't particularly enjoy hearing, and what I wish that someone had have told me. But it's interesting that as much as you don't want to hear it's gonna be all right, and I remember genuinely believing that this was it now, and I didn't make any goals or any dreams or any aspirations, and I didn't let myself believe that there was anything different. But it was that mindset that kept me in that box for as long as it did. So as much as I appreciate and I can empathise and sympathise, because I've been there, when you think that there's no energy to get out of bed and there's no way of thinking of anything better or allowing yourself to dream or allowing yourself to be, you have survived 100% of your worst days. So the odds of you overcoming tomorrow are looking pretty damn good. If we're just talking on statistics, if this was a bet on a racehorse or whatever it is that you're interested in, where odds may be against someone, the odds aren't actually against you, because you're still here. And every single day that you have navigated up to this point, you have actually survived. So if we're going to try and take all emotions out of it and look at it that way, that's one way to view it. You will get through tomorrow because you've already got through yesterday. Statistically, you've got through every single day, you'll get through tomorrow. And for as long as you don't allow yourself to live outside of the moment, I know that I'm saying, you know, it's been a bit of me saying to be present, and another bit of me saying, if you don't allow yourself to believe any different, there won't be any different. And if you don't start changing something, you're not going to experience anything other than what you currently have. So I'm not necessarily on about dreaming about a future career or going on a holiday or being even well. But what I am saying is make small changes to your current routine, because unfortunately we are experiencing depression. So then everything that we kind of do, think and feel and be mirrors that depression, until we live a life of a depressed person. And we do this because we're depressed, and we don't do this because we're depressed. And we wear these clothes and we're depressed, and we go here and we're depressed. And it's kind of like changing small things in your routine so that you are not living the life of a depressed person. So if this, it's allowing yourself to consider, what would life look like if I was no longer experiencing this, as specific as possible, and then just doing one thing on there. Like, I remember making this list myself. Like, there were days where I wouldn't even change my pajamas or open the curtains. So if the opposite of a depressed life is to open the curtains and wear different clothes, different set of pajamas, then they're small tasks that I have every faith that you would be able to achieve. If the curtains are always closed, you're always wearing pink pajamas, you don't have a cup of tea on a morning, and your life looks a certain way, just change one of them to mix up the experience that you're having. Because until you change the experience that you're having, you're going to get the same results. So whether it's a case of all day you're going to have the light on when usually it's off, do it. If it's a case of opening the curtains when usually always shut, open them. Just make small changes to your day-to-day life that are going to shift you from living the life of someone who's depressed and it's looked this way for so long, to now you're still experiencing depression, but you're doing it with the curtains open, which is something a little bit different to what you did yesterday. I'm a massive believer of change something, otherwise you will always have. I think they're probably the top things I would just say to anyone. And that, I've been there. Like, I've lived through a time where I didn't set any dreams or believe that I would live through my 20s. That was me between 16 and 19. And here I am, like a living testimony of someone who has battled. Like, I have fought for my life for a year and a half, and I'm here. And I have every faith that someone else is going to do the same thing. And like I said, the fact that your heart's still pumping the blood around your body right now as I speak is, you are a living testimony that you are surviving and that you will survive. But yeah, it's difficult because I've heard these things, and sometimes it's hard to take on, and sometimes it can make me want to not say anything, but really they're probably what I do want to say. Like, it is going to get better. It's not what you want to hear, but it's true. Like, I have every faith that that's the case.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a big thing for a lot of people, because we get so stuck in our own story and beliefs, and seeing you coming out the other side, and not only have you come out of the other side, but you've also developed a huge passion. Like, you've developed as a person, becoming yourself, which so many other people haven't even done that yet. You know, I think, like, it's amazing that, you know, you're living proof of that. And like what you said about doing something different, something that I've looked at and done before is something that, whatever goal you have, you know, like what you said, ask yourself, what would the person that I want to become, what would they do? You know, and maybe it's literally going out and getting fresh air for 5 minutes. You know, one thing. Yeah, in the grand scheme of things, it might not seem big at first, but over time, those little things become who you are. And I think it's just such a big step to changing who we are as people.
Yeah, 100%. I think you got not, even when we're not in. I just encourage everyone not to give up, and I think in not doing anything new or different, I mean, I appreciate staying the same is surviving, but then what quality of life do you want to have, and what's going to be the best way to get it? Because this isn't it. Like, there is so much more as well. I think we can then believe that this is all that is possible for us and all that is capable for us, and it's just not the case. You know, we are masters of our own life, and I think especially if there's people that are currently navigating depression who have had therapy and having therapy, and maybe it's exploring their past or exploring their current situation. You know, if you could be the woman of your dreams, the man of your dreams, who is it that you would be? And what if you can't think of that, and if you can't yet see that as being you, then just bring to mind the woman, man of your dreams, and what it is that they do, and how it is that they think, and what it is that they're on with. Now, how can you shift what you're doing to align with this idea? Even if you can't yet see that as ever being you, you have to start somewhere in making some adjustments and shifts and changes. I remember I'd make one change, and I just had it in my head that, you know, I don't know when this is going to come back and take my life away. So I don't actually want to build a life of any kind of meaning, because I don't know what caused this depression. I don't know if it's going to come back and get me. And I kind of was like not allowing myself to live because of all these beliefs around what I was currently experiencing. But until we do something different, until we actually try it, we're just not going to know. And yes, small things. I'm not talking about saving the world tomorrow. I'm literally just saying, maybe just change your PJs and wash your bedding, or it's don't make yourself a brew, eat something. It's just small things that will change the experience that you're having, and it kind of tricks your brain to thinking, whoa, this isn't what a depressed person does. And it's like, whoa, maybe I'm not actually a depressed person, because I've actually been able to do all this stuff that I told myself I would never be able to do. Even the secondary games aspect of it, what's good about staying where you are right now? You know, you're depressed, you're in pain. What's good about it? Because some interesting things crop up when you think of that. Life can be hard, chasing dreams can be hard, having dreams can be hard work, and I think sometimes there's these little beliefs that we don't know exist that are there. Challenge the experience that you're having and ask yourself what's going on, and what are the good things about it, what are the bad things about it. You know, who do you want to be, what do you want to have, and just giving more thought to your experience rather than living on autopilot. You're not going to change the experience that you have in depression. Like, I still have days where I get down. Would I call it that depression now? No, because I recognise like this element of choice that's involved in it, and this ability to change what it is that I'm experiencing should I choose to do it. We have more control than what we think, and I think a big part of my depression back then was believing that there wasn't actually any choice, and being stuck and it being out of my control. that shifts your mindset. If someone was to say to someone, this is within your control, how you feel tomorrow or what experience that you have, it's a shock to the system, and I don't think we always believe it. But kind of wrapping our head around that concept, I suppose.
Yeah, so true. No, that's so good. I love everything that you said, and I'm sure a lot of people will find it very, very useful as well. So I suppose like I'll wrap up the interview.
Yeah.
I think we'll probably do another one because there's so much to talk about. So finally, like, where can people find you if they want to get in touch and things like that?
Yeah, so everything that I'm running predominantly at the minute is through my Instagram. So my Instagram is authentic self JL. So it's authentic_self_JL. Working on bringing a website that'll come soon. Obviously taking on coaching clients. And that's for anyone who recognises a need for change, or anyone who recognises that they could be even more effective, even more resilient, even more resourceful, whatever that quality is, that resource is for you, that you want to develop or strengthen. Or even if you recognise a need for change because you're unhappy or you're experiencing something that you don't particularly want to, but you don't know what that is and you don't know how to get there, I'm here to kind of help you with that. That's pretty much me.
All your posts are like so insightful. I love reading them.
Oh, I'm so glad. Like, literally, there's so much content swirls around in my mind, and some of it's based on where I've been and my personal experiences, and then some of it is just interesting stuff that I've learned along the way that I just use as an outlet.
Like that, you've got so much inspiration as well. Like, it's so good. There's so much there. So.
Do you know what? I'm enjoying every single bit of it, and I think Instagram for me has been it's an amazing community. The mental health community is amazing. The fitness community is amazing. You kind of, when you use it for something a little bit different than just kind of scrolling, you come across and you meet people, you hear things, you read things that can adjust my day sometimes. Sometimes think it's a bad thing to scroll. I suppose it's what you have on your social media that's going to control the experience that you have with social media. I can go on Instagram and it can set my day off amazing because I'm following fellow coaches, fellow fitness instructors, people who are on with the same kind of stuff. Plant a seed in my mind, and that's it then. I'm pondering, writing my own content. My whole state has changed for the day.
Again, that's within our choice as well, who we follow and who we
follow and who we have. Definitely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to end it there.